Hey guys, what up? Welcome to this new video, and what I'm doing is I'm messing with Django 1.9, the latest version of Django as of the date of this video, which is April 25th, 2016. I'm going to go as quickly as I possibly can, and this is just to showcase how I would go about actually creating a Django website. Now, I host my Django websites in a Linux environment using Linode, which is a great company. I recommend them, but I develop on a Windows machine, so they're two conflicting operating systems, and working with those differences can sometimes be a little bit problematic. But in this particular case, we're going to try to get a Django website set up as quickly as possible in a Windows environment and not really worry about getting it to the Linux environment right now. Maybe I'll add that in the future, but let me know what you think. So first things first, guys, you need to know where you're going to put your project. I put my projects in my projects folder. And the name of the site that I'm going to be using is Noob Post. I'm basically rewriting it. I have it in Flask, but I want to do something a little bit more involved than what I'm doing currently. So I'm just going to call this thing Noob Post. So I have my folder there. Now, anytime you're dealing with Python, you need to have Python installed on your machine. So if you don't have Python, then you need to get that installed. So when you pull up a command prompt in Windows, you should be able to type Python, and it should pull up, an actual Python emulator here where it prints Python code. So this is the emulator that comes with Python. It actually runs Python, so you can do quick scripting and stuff like that. If you want to get out of that, do Control-C. But you want to make sure that that is there, that it's installed and added to your path. So I have plenty of videos on that. If you actually search my name and how to install Python, you'll find plenty of that. And then there's also sources on the web. But let's go into that new folder that we just created, which is Noob Post. Now, anytime you deal with Python, you probably want to do a virtual environment. It's really important. If you've ever done Node or any of this other stuff, it's all about basically encapsulating dependencies. So that way you don't have two projects that rely on the same plugin, but then you go and maybe one relies on a more up-to-date version of that plugin, and they're both trying to share, and it creates it's a major problem. So every project should have its own plugins, its own modules and things that it's using, and it should be isolated to just that project. So that's what virtual environment does for us. It's very easy to use. If you have Python 3 installed, or 3.5 or even 3.4 and probably earlier versions than that, it comes with virtual environment. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be using it at this point. But all you have to do is virtual environment, or virtual env, I'm sorry, and then you're going to give it the name of the environment. So we're just going to call it env, which is short for environment. Now I want to add two flags, which is a hyphen and say no site packages. So what this means is that if there is a package that two projects share, or the package is available in the global Python installation. And to explain that, when you install Python on your machine, you're going to have a Python 3.5 folder somewhere on your machine. In that folder, there's going to be site packages. That's going to be, there's a folder named site packages. In that is all the modules you have installed for 3.5 for your installation version of Python. What virtual environment does is it says, okay, I'm going to create a separate folder that's going to have its own site packages just for that folder, not for all Python 3.5, but just for that project. And what no site packages does, it says, hey, if I'm using a module that is installed in your installation Python 3.5 folder, don't use that even if it's already there, because I said no site packages. It's going to go ahead and install that anyway into my virtual environment. So that's what you want to do. That's what it's for. Hopefully I explained that okay. So this is going to go through, and it actually reaches across the web to get the latest version of Python, really. You can see that it's actually running setup tools and pip and stuff like that. So once we have this installed, we're going to need to activate the environment. So you can see that it went ahead and installed pip and all this other stuff that we use to install modules in Python. If I do a dir on that directory, you can see we now have an environment directory. So I'll go ahead and cd into the environment directory, and then now I want to cd into the scripts directory. And there's this this activate, and that's actually what we want to run. So on Windows, you just have to say activate, and now on the left hand side you can see the env environment is now activated. So anything I run with pip install is just going to be specifically for this one project folder. So if I say pip install Django, it's going to grab the latest version of Django, which is, you can see, 1.9.5, and it's going to go ahead and install it. And only that Django is going to be used by this project, noob post. And by the way, this project that I'm going to be trying to create is actually going to be a video to kind of supplement my YouTube videos. I've been kind of bouncing around different ideas and stuff like that, but ultimately my Flask website that I have currently is just it's not cutting it. And Django makes a lot of things so much easier, so I'm just going to go back to doing Django with that, and we'll see how it goes. But ultimately what this project is going to consist of is that it needs to use some of the latest web standards like Bootstrap and stuff like that. So I want it to be a relatively plain site, but I'll show you guys how to get all that set up. So now that we have Django installed here, you see, let's go ahead and one of the things with my Django website is you need to have a database. So I have a website or a video out there that is how to install Postgres, the database, the free and open source database that you can install on your Windows machine or Linux or Mac or whatever you're using. And my video though explains how to actually set it up on Windows. But once you actually install Postgres to your machine, if you run PGAdmin, you're going to see this PGAdmin 3, which is like this helpful little console application that allows you to interact with your database a lot easier. So if I double click on this and I type in my password, I now have connection to this database server, and you can see all these are like test databases that I have inside here. And you can see I already have a new post database. I'm actually going to delete that. I'm just going to drop the whole thing. I don't want it. But then I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. So I'll say new database, and then I can say new post. And then I want to give it a database owner, and you create an owner by default, but the default owner is Postgres, so I'll just say OK. And what this is going to do is it's going to go ahead and create the database for me. And it's a lot easier than having to go into the Postgres command line and do like raw commands and stuff like that. So now we have a database. Now let's go ahead and create our Django project. So I'm going to get out of the environment directory and go into the main noob post directory. And I'm going to go ahead and create a project called, we're going to call it post. Okay, so we're going to say Django admin.py, which is, this is a file that's going to be accessible now that we've installed Django. And we're going to say start project post. I'll just call it post. And now if we dir into the directory, you can see we now have an actual Django application set up, which is this post. So now what I use is Visual Studio. You can use any sort of editor that you want, but I like Visual Studio, so I'm going to say new project or solution. And if I go down to other languages here, I can go down. I can go to where's Python? There's Python, and I'll just say from existing Python code. And I need to give the project a name, and let me give it the right folder too. So I'm gonna go down to my new post folder that we just created. So I'll select that, and then we'll just call this post. Click OK. Go next, and now this is going to say global or default. So I want to, instead of doing a global installation, I want it to detect the virtual environment. And it looks like, so I actually want to customize this to a Django web project, and then we'll say finish. Alright, so now what I need to do with Visual Studio is I need to right click on this and say set as my startup file. So my manage.py should always be my startup file. If I right click on the project and I go to properties in Visual Studio, I can go to my debug panel here and I can actually give it the port number that I want it to be set up under. So every time it runs, it'll use port 8000. Now, the application I don't think is going to work, but let's go ahead and try it. So if I just play it from my Visual Studio editor, it may run, it may not. We'll find out. Okay, so all right, no module name, new post. Maybe it needs to be my... Oh, I see. So for some reason, the project name here is named New Post, and it thinks that the actual app name is going to be called New Post as well. So I actually need to rename this to Post as the name of the project. That should work. So if I go ahead and run it from the editor, so this is why the editors are a lot easier to deal with, just because you can just click of a button and run it, and it's easier, I guess. So this will actually fire up a Django site. Normally it's quicker than this. Okay, so now it's listening on port 8000, so the localhost address, port 8000. If we look at it, we can see that we do have a Django powered application running. Now here's a gotcha, which is a term that means something that's going to trip you up. With Python 3.5 and the latest version of Django, especially using Postgres, let's go into our settings file real quick, and we're going to do our database settings. So if you want, let's see, so we want to change this to use our Postgres database. So what I need to do is I actually need to remove this Django DB all the way to backends here, and then I'm going to do .postgresql _PSYCOPG2, and then we need to give our database a name, so it's called new post. We need to assign a user, and the user is going to be the Postgres user, or whoever you have as the user of the database that we created earlier. So here's password, and I'll give you guys my password for this test database. It's a hard one to remember, test123, and it's not live, so I'm not worried about being hacked or anything. In fact, I created the database just for demonstration purposes. So you can see test123. Now Postgres is not going to work without an actual plugin, and what we need to do in order for this to actually work on a Windows machine, at least it was for relatively recently, you need to download this PSYCOPG2, basically the latest version of this PSYCOPG2 module, which is the Python module that makes Postgres work with Python. And the reason why, at least as of a couple weeks ago, the latest version of Python was not working on a Windows environment. So I had to manually, like basically I couldn't do pip install and reach across the web and grab it. Like for some reason it couldn't compile or something like that. But ultimately it's easy enough to just be able to take that wheel file, and then we're going to put it in our own environment. So here's the new post, the folder we created. Inside environment is our virtual environment. Inside lib is the site packages folder, and this is what I was telling you guys about before. This is all for your virtual environment, so this is any sort of Python module that your project is going to use. So this is the wheel file, so this is the hardcore way of just installing something manually. So now let's go into the environment folder, go into lib site packages, basically where we just pasted that file, which is right here, this wheel file, and I'm going to say pip install, and make sure you're in your virtual environment. Pip install PSYCOPG2-2.6.1-c2.2-none-win32.whl. So if you've ever had to, or if you ever need to manually install a module, that's how you do it. Now we need to go to our main root directory of our folder. We're going to go into the post folder, which is basically the name of our Django application. And what Django does whenever you create a new application, there's going to be a post module. So if I go into this next post folder, in fact, let me show you guys through the editor. It's easier. So you can see that we have this this post directory, and inside that it contains a post folder, but it also has, we can get rid of this SQL, we don't need that, but it also has this manage.py file. So anything you do with Django, whenever you're doing database updates and stuff like that, you're going to use this manage.py file. Inside the post is basically the settings file and the URLs and the WSGI file and all that stuff that Django needs. So that said, let's go ahead and we need to run a command. One of the gotchas with Python, especially with Django, is that the database migrations need to actually take place before I could create a super user. So I'll explain that now. What I need to do is say Python manage.py, and I'm going to say migrate. I had to do migrate first before I could actually create my super user. Now that I've done that, I can say Python manage.py create super user, all one word. And then here, so I can create like some sort of username. You can provide your email. Now you need to make sure you type your password right both times. And now it created a super user. So now that that has been done, if I go ahead and I play the project again, so here's the file. If I go to /admin, Django has this awesome built-in admin, so I can log in with my user that I just created, and this is actually logging into my database. So you can see under users, it created the super user who has staff status, and this user has authority to change basically anything in the website. It can create new users and all other stuff. It's so helpful having this just work out of the box. I mean, when you compare Django to Flask or MVC or like ASP.NET or any of that other stuff, or Node, this is, even after years and years of developing, this is just such a beautiful thing. All right, guys. So now the next thing we need to download Bootstrap. Okay. Actually, before we even do that, let's go to I'm going to stop the server. I'm going to go to the directory where the project is installed. Inside this post folder, I'm going to create a folder called static. And then I'm also going to create another folder called templates. Inside of our templates, we're going to create, actually we'll worry about that later. All right, so now with Bootstrap, I can say just download this joint. This is going to download it into a zipped up directory. So we're going to unzip the entire contents of Bootstrap, which is fonts, CSS, and all this stuff. We're going to extract it, and we're going to put it into projects, new post static. I think that's where it is, right? Alright, so if everything went well, and we pull up our folder inside static, we now have the CSS and all this other stuff, so that's good. Now we need to tell Django where our templates can be found. So in Django 1.9, there's this templates list which contains key value dictionaries. So in here they have a directory key, and then the value is actually a list of different directories where your templates can be found. So this is just going to be straight directory to your templates folder. So new post templates, I think is where it is. Alright, down at the bottom we also need to add our static files directory shorthand, and this is going to help us if you just copy and paste. This is going to actually be able to link to our CSS and everything that we're going to end up using during development. That also means that we need to update our static URL, so we're going to actually give, this is going to be the actual drawn out path to where we put our static folder, so it's post static. Okay. I think this is good. So now let's go ahead, and since I'm using Visual Studio, this is something that you don't have to do, but I included in my project. Next, I'm going to create a folder inside my templates, which is going to be for layouts. And now let's go ahead and create a new item. And it is just going to be just a simple HTML page. And I don't want to call it web page HTML, but we're going to rename this layout. I'll just call it layout. And then under the templates folder itself, we're going to go ahead and create an HTML page for index. And then I'm inside my index right now. We're going to do, this is template, Django's template language, so we'll say extends layout.html. So what this does, this points to that layout folder, and it basically says, hey, use that main layout. So that way I only have to define a complicated layout file one time. So you can see, we'll say new post. In fact, you know what, we'll do this. Block, title, and block. So Django has the ability to allow us to use these templates and make use of these template tags to just fill them in. So like since index is extending the layout, I can just say block title, and then here I'll just say home. And then any sort of block, you always have to have an in block statement. And then we're going to do another block for content. In block, and then here we'll just say it's just a standard message. So since we're doing block content, let's go ahead and put that here. Alright, so now the main the layout file can have all the complicated CSS and JavaScript and everything, and then all you have to do is do block tags for any sort of page that implements that master page, and that implementation is being done there. And I'm actually missing an apostrophe. That should be in, yeah, there should be 2 apostrophes there. Alright, so let's see. That should be good. Let's go ahead and go to our post, our main app here. And we're going to do a URL for the index. So we need to say R. Oh, wait. You know, I think I can just say something like that. That should work. And then here we can say post.views.index. So I think that'll work. So what this does is a regular expression. It means match anything. So if it matches basically the root directory of your application, then it's going to point it to the index view. And right now we don't even have an index in our post app. So let's go ahead and add a Python file. So we'll say empty Python file. We'll call it views.py. Now inside our views at the top, we're going to say from Django.shortcuts import render, and this is just a easy way of being able to render a template to the user when they request it. So anything in Django, this is your views file, so it's just a Python method that returns a template. And this request object is actually the user's information. It'll contain things like the user's IP address and all this other stuff. And that's it. So we're going to have this empty dictionary that we're passing back, but we'll get more into that later. But for now, let's just go ahead and do this. And I want to go ahead and run. We made a lot of changes. Let's see if I've tripped up on anything here, because I'm just going off the cuff here. Oh, here's my, yeah, I referenced a variable here that I didn't define. because I copied and pasted that from another project, I forgot to actually define it. But let's just go ahead and we're just going to give it the straight path to our application here. So just like we did before, this is going to go right to the static folder. And really, crap. Really, it can be this same path to our static folder. Just put it here. I don't need that comma either. Alright, sorry about that. So let's go ahead and stop this and rerun it. Alright, so now you can see we actually have our web page being rendered, so our templates and all that stuff is working, so that's good. Now, if you're on Windows, and especially if you're using Visual Studio and you notice this weird gap in Chrome, it's a weird issue, and I'm probably going to save you a ton of time if you've ever had this problem, but all you have to do is go over to File for the layout page, and go File, oh wait, advanced save options. I feel like that wasn't just showing. Okay. And then go all the way down to the bottom and just say Unicode without signature. It's so weird that you have to do that. And now if I save it, if I went back to this, you can see the weird gap. The freaking site's not running now. I stopped it. But you'll see that that gap has gone away. That took forever to figure out. In fact, I posted a question on Stack Overflow, even had a video like demonstrating the problem. As far as I know, nobody else really runs into this situation, and that's the solution. So I ended up figuring that out for myself. That was a long time ago, and I think I just got lucky kind of guessing. But now if I inspect element, you'll see that that weird gap issue isn't there anymore. See how it's gone. So that said, all right, so now our templates are working and everything. So let's go ahead and make use of our let's see, let's make use of our Bootstrap stuff and just make sure that that is working. So if I say link href equal, and then here's where it's nice to be able to use the static keyword that comes with Django. So I can say CSS, and basically there's just a shortcut that jumps right to the static folder. And the reason why this is nice is because you just have to define where that static folder is in your settings file, and you can change, you can move this Django project somewhere else, some other machine, some other operating system, and just update that value. And ideally everything should be able to work. So you don't have all these absolute hard-coded paths all over the place that you have to update manually anytime you change stuff around. Alright, so now that we have, this is standard Bootstrap styles here, and class names and everything. So if I do div class container, this should like center the content in the middle. Alright, let's see if this works. I really need to just keep the site running. Okay, so we have a new error here. This is, it says, did you forget the static tag? So this actually trips up a lot of people too, but anytime you're using that static keyword that I was telling you about, the first thing you need to do at the top of your page is say, load static files. Alright, so let's see. So for some reason though, so you can see our Bootstrap is not loading, so let's take a look here. So let's see if that's even where the file is. Oh yes, you have a typo. Bootstrap. Okay, I was about to say, why is that not working? So you can see there's a typo right there. So Bootstrap, still a typo. A big typo. Alright. Alright, so now you can see the different Bootstrap styles, centered content, all that stuff. So anyway, guys, we now have a pretty good website going in Django, so that's pretty sweet. And this is Django 1.9, Python 3.5. And thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Bye.